One question asked at the right moment to save a patient's life.
The higher performing teams actually made more errors.
Leaders often don't mean to be so unsafe. The reality is I sometimes see is they get real defensive.
As leaders, we don't know all the answers, and we shouldn't have to think that we have to know all the answers all the time. Asking for feedback, we sometimes forget to do that as leaders. We're scared of what might be coming at us. But just having that open door policy and being able to listen to really hear what's going on, I think is very important.
Welcome to the Transforming Healthcare Coaching Podcast, where we're all about helping healthcare professionals like you create positive change at work, at home, and everywhere in between. So welcome to the Transforming Healthcare Coaching Podcast. I'm your host, Lillian. Today I'm joined with Gillian Faith. So how are you doing this new year in 2026, Gillian?
Good, thank you. How are you?
Doing well. Can't believe it's 2026. It is interesting times in the world.
Absolutely.
And so before we dive in, what's energizing you? What is bringing you fresh energy in your work as a coach right now?
I have to say that what brings me energy is when I work with individuals or teams and I see a shift in their thinking or a shift in the way they work together that then leads to a positive outcome that then provides value to either the team or the people or the services that the team is there to provide.
Yeah, it's really amazing to bear witness to that. So for everyone listening, this is what we're going to tackle today. The research is clear that high-performing healthcare teams share very specific characteristics: psychological safety, shared mental models, and clear coordination. But the gap between knowing this, actually building it as a leader and as a follower, that's where teams usually get stuck. And so we are going to spend some time deconstructing how we develop high-performing healthcare teams. And so, Gillian, when you walk into a healthcare team that's really working well, like this just jiving, that everyone knows their high performance, these can be administrative teams or clinical teams. What do you notice first?
One of the first things that I would notice is how the leader's showing up. And in high-performing teams or teams that are creating high value for their clients, for their patients, there's trust, and the trust is coming from the person in charge. So having trust, and also we hear a lot about psychological safety. It's very, very important, and trust is, the core of psychological safety. And you may be familiar with Amy Edmondson's work, where she did a study in hospitals and she looked at how teams performed, and the higher performing teams actually made more errors than the ones that were, performing at a lower level. And the reason for this is that the team members felt more comfortable admitting when a mistake had been made, or saying they didn't know, or actually disagreeing with somebody or challenging the person who's in authority. So I think in observing high-performing teams, the trust and the psychological safety is very, very important.
I'm hearing what you're saying, because I think the worst thing that always can happen whenever like a bad outcome has happened or afterwards is when everyone sheepishly looks down at the ground and they're like, I guess I probably should have said something, or I probably should have spoken up, or I actually noticed something. And then you realize, you kick yourself, like, why didn't I say something? Whenever like it comes to that psychological safety, how do you craft that as the team leader or as the one of the members of the team? Is there anything that anyone can do to make it better?
Yeah, there are things we can do to make it better. And I would encourage leaders to do things like ask for feedback, be open to feedback and actually listen to it. And then you're creating a culture of giving and receiving feedback. And let's face it, a lot of people don't like to receive feedback. They don't like to give it, and it can be uncomfortable, but it actually is very, very important. And normalizing that makes such a difference on a team. So that's definitely one thing.
I'm wondering, too, like whenever I think about really good feedback, it's quick, precise, no biggie. I don't think any more or less of you as a person, because of it. And it's just like, hey, point it out and just move on. Like friend to friend, like you have lipstick on your teeth or something. Just tell me like it's there. Like if you cared about me, you tell me. And so I think it's always really interesting when you notice that people can do that, especially when it comes to things that they notice that are happening in the room, right? Because I'm so grateful. And sometimes the chaos, if someone just really tries to tell me what's happening, sometimes it takes like 3 times, and I clearly am not listening. I'm glad for the persistence for some people.
Yeah. Or having a quick debrief afterwards and, just quickly recapping what could have gone better, what could we maybe do the next time.
Yeah. It's funny that you say that about feedback. You are so right. People are really terrified of feedback. We often say that we don't get good feedback. We are afraid to give it. We're afraid to receive it. In fact, there's like a litany of feedback books, and we probably should do an episode just on feedback. But I'm curious if you have any tips in terms of how to get over that fear of being humiliated or fear of being embarrassed in front of people, and just that all that fear that actually is the real reason underlying why the feedback is never given or is awkward.
Yeah. And, you know, giving feedback, if it's an individual, you always want to do it in private. You don't want to do it in front of other people. But there's going to be other times where, feedback to a team or a group or, and just discussing what really happened is completely appropriate. Again, I'm going to go back to the creating the culture of normalizing giving and receiving feedback, because if it's as a leader, we communicate that it's expected and it's part of what we do and it's part of how we show up, then it takes some of that emotion away and it takes some of that that fear around being, like you say, judged or whatever. If we need to give somebody feedback, sometimes it's really nice to just take them aside and just say, are you open for a discussion on what just happened, at just maybe asking their permission just to get into the conversation. It always helps. It's not always the best way to go, but it's just one way to do it. And also we did a session on radical candor with, Kim Scott's textbook on that. And with radical candor, you want to show the person you're giving feedback to that you care about them personally, but then you want to give them feedback directly. And if they know that it's coming from a good place and they feel that you do care, they will receive the feedback in a much more positive way.
Yeah, no, it's true. There's always like, I really want you to look good as a leader, and I just need you to know that when you speak this way to a particular nurse, like that's not acceptable. You make everyone afraid of you. And that's actually feedback I've received from a colleague of mine, but it's true. So you gotta say hard things, and you gotta say it's also unacceptable. Like the way you're behaving is not right. You need to tone it down. And then, I mean, I heard it. I heard it immediately loud and clear. So I'm really grateful for the nurse that told me that. But it's hard. It's really hard to have the bravery and the courage to do that. And I think generationally that people recognize that they do have that opportunity. I do sometimes worry that there's a lot of fear, between hierarchy, disciplines, culture, race. Like you don't know is it okay, because there is a lot of fear for retribution, unfortunately, I think, as the hidden, secret behind everything. They're like, oh, what if this will get back? Or what if I don't get promoted because of this? Or what if I get a reputation, right? Even worse. Um, I don't know if you have any thoughts for that.
Not specifically, but that's coming right back around to the psychological safety again.
Meaning that if you just explain to everyone, the way I like to run my ship here in this department is that it's okay to give feedback, and that I will give you potentially feedback by the end of your shift every single time. And it's also okay to speak up for what you need. And it's okay to tell people, but just to be able to just voice that is what I'm hearing you say.
Absolutely. And help people become more comfortable knowing it's not actually a nice to have, it's actually an expectation of working here, and we're going to listen to it.
My trainees and fellows and students have told me for years that the culture of safety isn't always there for speaking up like this. And if you're sitting with a leader who feels like their team doesn't feel safe speaking up, what do you see in the moment, like in the coaching session when you're coaching the physicians or the nurse leaders? Um, And they basically are grappling with they just received feedback that they are not safe and they don't create that environment for people. Like, what do you see in them? What's it feel like?
I think what we would be seeing in a client or a leader like that is perhaps they're struggling with how they're showing up as a leader, right? Do they feel like they have imposter syndrome where they don't feel like they have, they may have all the skills that they need, but they don't actually recognize that. So how do they feel in their leadership position? Where are they leading from? Do they have some fears around, what's maybe happening?
Yeah, no, I would totally agree. I do it's funny whenever we do some of our workshops and when we try to talk about this and deconstruct it, um, many of the faculty in the back are like, "Well, sometimes we're not really well." Like, like we're stressed out. We just like you said, the imposter syndrome, the not sure what to do, you feel helpless, you feel frustrated. Leaders often don't mean to be so unsafe. And at the same time, the reality is the other thing I sometimes see is, yeah, they get real defensive, really defensive really quickly in terms of excuses, um, trying to explain away why they behave that way, making it's the system's fault rather than recognizing if you're well and able and confident and whole and okay in that moment, then you have the capacity to be able to receive hard feedback, right?
Yeah, and as leaders, we don't know all the answers, and we shouldn't have to think that we have to know all the answers all the time. And I think in healthcare, especially in your role as a physician, you're expected to know the answers, right, when you're dealing with patients. But there's other times when, as a leader, you may not know all the answers when it comes to leading a team or how to show up for your team. And perhaps, some help around that would be beneficial to the leader and the team.
Right. Yeah, which is why we often try to shift from that defensive, feeling helpless or really unsure or feeling imposter, instead of shifted to moving towards how can you be more curious? How can you be more wondering? Because I mean, it is true. It is kind of you feel sort of stupid to say that you don't know something or you're not sure. And you also feel like that's not what the team needs. Like, great. Like, so I don't know what to do. I mean, like if I think back in the pandemic, that's terrible to think that we don't know what to do. You want to know what to do. And so the question is asking more questions helps everyone get there together.
Yeah, and then being able to really listen to what's being said.
Yeah, so I'm wondering for the leaders who are listening right now and thinking, yeah, this sometimes happens on my team, and oops, I actually have a direct report that might sometimes behave this way, and there may be some opportunities for me to maybe suggest some things to shift that dynamic to make things more safe. Do you have any ideas or tips that you would suggest for people who either are a new leader or have direct reports?
Yeah. I think it's important to have a mentor. If you're a new leader, a mentor, or be working with a leadership coach, or be in some kind of working on leadership development.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think having mentors and accountabilities and role models is really important. Um, and then I think the other wonder is I often also think that sometimes we don't know who to debrief with, right? So I think sometimes to get along with your point, we don't know who to talk with about these situations, which is why I do think that many leaders find coaches because, well, who are you going to talk with about it? If you may or may not have someone who's assigned as a mentor in your organization, then you need to go find the support that you need.
Yeah, and the coach can provide a safe, confidential space. And it's non-judgmental, so it's okay to just, let it all out and then, take it from there.
Yeah, so we have this idea here at Transforming about changing teams one person at a time and changing healthcare one person at a time. And so, could you walk us a little bit about how you sometimes see this play out? What's it look like when one leader just starts to shift their approach?
So that can be, I'm just going to use the word transformational, and which is, yeah, it's a big word and it can mean lots of different things. But the way a leader shows up in terms of communication and how well the team is aligned, to be part of a cohesive team, the communication has to be right, the alignment has to be right, and the psychological safety has to be there. So if that is not present in a team and a leader can shift to embodying those values, you can certainly see a shift in the team.
Right. And so, other things, I've noticed that whenever leaders begin to think like their coach a little bit, and you start asking questions, right? So I don't know. I still always remember there was a moment like early when I had my first coach, like she'd ask me questions and then I'd wonder about things. And it's almost like you could hear that person's voice later, right? When you're in the moment, you're just like, what would so and so say? Or what would so and so be telling me to think? And then next thing you know, you're like, let me just try to think of a question to be more expansive and more curious in that moment, so that people have opportunity to say things.
Yeah, and being curious and asking more questions. If there is, tension or conflict on a team or even just between two people, it can really help open that up, and it can really help, build relationships based on deeper connection.
Yeah. In the reference back to Amy Evanson's book, The Fearless Organization and Creating Psychological Safety in the Workplace, I do think that it's like these tiny little changes when like once one person on a team starts to be a little bit different on who's speaking, who's making decisions, who's questioning things, and just kind of changing roles out. We often do that in some of our assessments that we do for teams, whether that be the Principles Us or the ELI 360s, just seeing how people interact. And then you start to realize you have a way of showing up differently. And just to try it is fun. And so she really talks about how changing slight things can make a big difference.
And just gaining awareness is huge. We know as coaches that, when our clients gain more awareness around who they are, who they're showing up as, and more awareness around who's on their team, it really helps the dynamics.
What do you think is the hardest part for leaders when they're trying to make these shifts and be different, be a better leader, coach kind of person? Where do they get stuck?
I'm going to go back to the awareness, so it's figuring out, what it is that needs to change. And, new habits can be hard to make sustainable sometimes. So I think trying out the new habit, the new behavior, and seeing that it works, getting some positive feedback or some positive responses will help a leader continue to try new things.
I hear what you're saying, that meaning that, if they don't see any positive effect, they sort of stop doing and they go back to their old habits where they just try to fix things for everybody or have all the answers themselves. And it's helpful to look for either some kind of support or positive response from their team to be able to keep doing those things.
Right. And again, asking for feedback, we sometimes forget to do that as leaders, but it's very, very important. Sometimes we're scared of what might be coming at us, but just having that open door policy and being able to listen to really hear what's going on, I think is very important.
Yeah, I mean, listening rounds have been well documented in terms of being really important for all levels of leadership to go down into different areas to be able to see what really happens. Um, if you want to become that leader, the one who changes their team one person and one interaction at a time, what do you think is the very first micro step that someone listening to this podcast could try tomorrow?
I think really pausing and really maybe taking more notice of, we all get into such, we get in the weeds, right, with the work that has to be done and, whatever we're dealing with. So possibly taking a step back and pausing and really considering who we have on their team, and maybe there are other attributes that we're not using, that we're not capitalizing on. And sometimes asking people, what else would they like to achieve? What would help make their career more fulfilling? What career developmental goals would they like to achieve? And I think if there's that understanding, it can be very helpful as well.
I love those two main action points. So for leaders, can you do the step back? Can you just, in the moment when you really want to get sucked into like some kind of problem, take a step back and then putting it back on the persons who are involved deeply in the frontline solutions. Like what will help? Like what structural supports? Let them have some agency to suggest the ideas. Because if you don't provide that opportunity to get the ideas and you just think you need to just boss people around and tell people the outcome before it's even happened, you're actually closing off to innovation and closing off to letting people just do their job now. Yeah. So it's been really fun talking with you about all of these different teams. And so if this conversation is resonating with you, we love to invite you to share with a colleague or someone who you know might be, thinking about their team dynamics right now or just entering into a new position in terms of leadership position. And um, as a healthcare leader, if you're ready to develop your skills, we'd love to begin the conversation about some of the programs we have here at Transforming Healthcare Coaching for you to become the leader to transform your team one conversation at a time. We'd love to talk with you about working together. Head over to transforminghealthcarecoaching.com to learn about our leadership coaching programs. So, Gillian, I guess as we close out, do you have any final thoughts?
We all know we have to listen, right? But we have to listen really carefully and take on what people are saying. And just being able to create the atmosphere, the climate for your teams where people feel safe coming to talk to you and bringing things that may be of importance, like you were saying, especially when it comes to patient safety, feeling like they can come to talk without any fear of retribution or anything like that. So,
Love that. Thank you so much. Thanks everyone for listening, and we'll see you in our next episode. Thanks so much for listening. If you found value in today's episode, please subscribe and share with a colleague who would benefit. Together, we can transform healthcare one person at a time. Find us anywhere you find your podcasts. Ready to take your healthcare leadership journey to the next level? Book a discovery call free at transforminghealthcarecoaching.com to explore our personalized coaching packages designed specifically for healthcare professionals like you.